how's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at Beyond Re-Animator. This is from 2003, directed by Brian Yuzna, and stars Jeffrey Combs, Jason Barry, and Elsa Pataky, and is inspired by the serialized short story by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, this is the third and so far final entry in the Re-Animator trilogy, and this is the one that gets overlooked. If they ever do a special edition Blu-ray or a Steelbook, it's usually just for the first two entries in the franchise, and this one gets kind of forgotten. And I mean, I guess I get that. It's 13 years after the last entry, and we clearly have a lower budget, and I think the story was something like it had its premiere in an edited form on the Sci-Fi Channel, and if you wanted to see the full movie, you had to wait for the DVD. Yeah, that wasn't great, and this movie deserved more, because despite all that was working against it, this movie is pretty solid. And I mean, okay, the first Re-Animator is an all-time classic, and Bride of Re-Animator is a solid sequel, and Beyond Re-Animator is a step down. It's definitely the worst in the trilogy, but it's not bad by any means, and a large part of that is having Jeffrey Combs back. The way he plays this character is absolutely so engaging and really pulls you in, and there are definitely some good character moments in this movie. It's set in a prison, which is inherently different, and we also get the way that changes his outlook, like Jeffrey Combs naturally has a superiority complex. What if he's locked in with a bunch of criminals? He's in a position of less power, but also thinks probably even more highly of himself. There's some interesting moments in here, but also Brian Yuzna. He was the producer on the first one, the director of Bride of Re-Animator, and now he's back, and boy does he know the world. You see in all of his movies, he has a real appreciation for practical effects, and that is in here, like Screaming Mad George, the practical effects artist. He's back in this movie as well. There's some really good, gory, and over-the-top moments, and I won't say where it goes to, but the end of this movie gets so big and extreme. Like, the third act here really gets chaotic, and I really do love it. Now, yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, like with Yuzna's other sequel, Bride of Re-Animator, the new characters aren't quite as good, and every now and then you do get some weird low-budget moments, and things like Richard Band, the composer who did the music in the first two, really sorely missed in this one. But despite all that, it still is a really solid entry. I remember when I first watched this, I was surprised how much of the world they were able to pull back, and just how much like the other two this one actually is. And I was a little nervous doing the rewatch for this review if it would hold up or not, but I'm pleased to say that for the most part this really does hold up. Again, it's the weakest in the franchise and it definitely has some problems, but you know what? It's still a really fun movie, and some of that low budget weirdness actually kind of does mash with the Re-Animator weirdness, and when this gets a little bit crazy, that actually kind of adds something to it. So overall, definitely check this one out if you haven't already. It is worth a watch. Don't expect it to be as good as the other two, but it is severely underrated. Again, go check this out if you haven't. But anyway, I do want to talk a bit more about this movie. I'm going to talk a bit about the plot and analyze a few things, but I'll be avoiding the ends and I'll try not to do any major spoilers, but let's talk a bit about the plot and do some analysis. We open up with a scene that I really do like. We get two kids having a sleepover, and one of their older sisters is there, and this kid, Howard, really loves his older sister, and yeah, some people do read into that, but let's not talk about that right now. Anyway, they live in a house by the cemetery, by the same cemetery that Herbert West and Dan live next to, and bad news, this is set on the very night that Bride of Re-Animator is going to have its epic conclusion, and a stray zombie is going to wind up in this house and kill the older sister. And then we get this shot a little bit later after everything's kind of settled down, and the police are arresting Herbert West, and as they arrest him, he drops a syringe of his reagent, and the kid picks it up. His life forever changed. Well, after all this happens, we cut to 13 years later, the real life time jump, and Herbert West has been in prison this whole time. Now, normally I'm not a huge fan of that sequel trope where since the last movie, the main character's life has just been horrible. But that being said, we are talking about Herbert West here. Yeah, he did a ton of crimes and it totally makes sense for him to be in prison. And as I said earlier, it does have an interesting power dynamic with his superiority complex and he's locked in here with all these criminals. But also he's like catching rats and continuing to do his experiments. I love that bit of perseverance from him. He's behind bars and has to be extra secretive, but he's still going to try to bring stuff back to life. Anyway though, one day he gets a new work assignment and he's assigned to the prison hospital under the Dr. Howard Phillips. And yeah, that's an obvious Easter egg, but it's also the kid from the beginning. And he says, "I came here on purpose to meet you." And he gives him the reagent back. And I absolutely love the scene where he gets the reagent back, the way he holds it up and admires it. It's been 13 years since he's seen this stuff, and the way he goes, "It's been 13 years, can this still possibly work?" Almost like it's a metaphor for the series, but I love that look in his eyes when he finally gets his hands back on the stuff. And well, wouldn't you know it, one of the prisoners just happened to have a heart attack. Let's get back to work. Like, the time he gets it to the time he uses it, only a couple minutes. We're already bringing people back and already having some zombies because of course it still works. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, the new Dr. Howard, he's clearly a stand-in for Dan. And yeah, he is, but I have to say, I kind of like that in some ways because it shows West's fear of influence, you know? West can corrupt people so easily, and the fact that he got to this guy when he was a kid, and it was inadvertent even, I think that really does say something about his sort of power he has over other people, and it's kind of scary that he can just one day pull you into his horrible schemes. But yeah, the two have set up a lab in a secret room in the back of the prison. They're working to bring people back to life, and there's a bit of a twist on it this time with, I think it's called NPE, neuroplasmic energy. Basically, in the first movie, Wes learned that consciousness existed throughout the body, and in the second movie, he was playing with parts and recombining the parts, and he had that question of consciousness on his mind. Now, West isn't the kind of guy who's gonna say anything about a soul, but he starts to contemplate electrical energy, a charge that leaves people when they die. Well, what if you were to harvest it before someone dies and use that as the secret ingredient to get people closer to being normal? Not really a spoiler, but it's obviously not going to work how Wes plans it to, and the way that mixing NPE kind of messes with the zombies, it really is an interesting idea, and also shakes things up just a little bit. I can see some people saying, oh, it's kind of like midichlorians or something, you know, a new force that kind of jostles the old continuity, but you know what? West would be working to add more pieces and would be trying to change his theories, so I get adding in more to it, and plus we get some wacky through the syringe and up into the brain shots. It's some fun over-the-top imagery that I kind of do love. But we also have some other characters this time around. Of course, we're in a prison, so we have the evil warden. He's not as good as David Gale, but he is an absolute maniacal villain who is going to cause West to get very angry. And we also have a few other inmates, like the one they bring back from the heart attack. He had this whole thing where he was religious but kept doing horrible things, and he's going to have less of a filter now that he's a zombie. We also have the rat. Turns out that was a pet of a gangster, and with Wes messing with the rat, he's in some trouble with this guy. But the last major character is this reporter character. But of course, if Howard is a parallel for Dan, he's going to instantly fall in love with a beautiful woman, and we have this reporter coming to the prison, and she kind of has her own motives. You don't know why she's investigating this prison, and you also have to worry because she's also drawing the attention of the evil warden. But even though Jeffrey Combs says, hey, don't trust this woman, Howard is going to fall head over heels for her, and for some reason the line, "you remind me of my sister," works on her. But yeah, within like a day they're together. And she does have a lot more to do than the reporter from Bride of Re-Animator, so I do like they gave her a little bit more of a plot. And I will say, towards the end of the movie, as I said earlier, things really heat up, and I really do like the final act of this movie. It gets pretty crazy and intense, and Jeffrey Combs really does have some standout moments, and there is also some standout moments with the practical effects, some really cool over-the-top ideas. And I won't say what it is, but speaking of the movie's wacky antics, there is a mid-credit scene that has to be seen to be believed. Anyway though, as I said, Beyond Re-Animator, not as good as the first two, but surprisingly solid. Way better than you thought it would be, and it was amazing how much they were able to get back of this world 13 years later on a lower budget. Seriously, go check it out. Again, don't expect the world out of it, but a surprisingly solid sequel, and honestly, I really wish we got more of these, you know? It kinda sucks there's only 3 Re-Animator movies. I kind of have hope that maybe Shudder will give us another trilogy. I mean, they brought VHS and Creepshow back. Maybe they can bring Re-Animator back as well? Yeah, I don't know, but that would be really cool. Anyway though, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Re-Animator playlist, where you can see my reviews of the last 2 movies, as well as the weird Italian movie, Re-Animator Academy, and the hack/comic book crossover. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist here. Have a good day now.